Welcome to Your Gray Matters, the podcast that unveils the miracles already amongst us. Here, we believe that the human mind cannot be defeated. Tune in to discover the fascinating people with extraordinary stories, innovative products, and groundbreaking services. With your host, Neil Silvert, who's earned his gray hair and still has use of his gray matter.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Your Gray Matters podcast. And as you know, we are the podcast that looks at different things that we feel are very interesting in our country and in our world. We love to believe in the human mind, that the human mind cannot be defeated. And we're looking for great topics and great people. And we want to do something unusual for us today. And we are, as always, not here to pass judgment on anybody. We are curious. We're living in Canada. Times are changing. And we want to do a discussion tonight about how our very new government, our minority Liberal government, is doing, and our new Prime Minister, Mark Carney. Let me tell you, if any other party like the Conservatives were in power, we'd be asking the same questions tonight. And following on presenting to you great people with great minds, we are very excited to bring back the Honorable Dan McTeague to our show. Hi, Dan. Welcome back.
Hi, Neil. It's been great to come back. Looking forward to the discussion. And yeah, thanks for having me yet again.
Really excited. For those of you who don't know, everybody, the Honorable Dan, as I call him, is a member of the Privy Council. He's a former member of Parliament. He was with the Liberal Party, but in the last election, he was out working to get Pierre Poilievre elected. And if you're not sure why, check into our last podcast with Dan, which we will post at the end of this. But Dan's really known also for his consumer advocacy work. He's known as the gas guru. You've probably heard him on radio or TV. What's the gas price for tomorrow? Well, Dan knows, and Dan's going to talk about it a little bit tonight. He leads Canadians for Affordable Energy, and he is really a terrific man. Again, Dan, thanks for coming on. I love him because he knows about climate change, or I don't know if we're having climate change, or I don't know if it's working. So I thought we asked tonight. Dan, as I said, glad to have you back. You know, ladies and gentlemen, we all have a stake in this country. We all went through, thank God, a democratically, properly run election. Few hiccups maybe, but generally a good election. We ended up with a minority government. We ended up with a Prime Minister, Carney, who is the former head of the Bank of England. He's known internationally for his financial experience and competence. But people just hired him to deal with President Trump, I think. So let me ask you a question, Dan, and I want to start off with what you know best. So I've noticed that the price of gasoline is really fluctuating. It's up, it's down. It's generally lower today, but we always talked going into the last election about the consumer tax, the axe the tax. Tell us, Dan, what's going on with the price of gas? And more than that, can you explain to us, where are we with carbon tax? So go ahead, lay it on us.
Well, prices are a little cheaper than they were this time last year. You were paying about $1.60 for a liter of gasoline. Now you're in the 130, 135 range. Depending really, Neil, where you are in the country, it's high as $1.75, 70 in the Maritimes. Actually, $1.70, $1.60 in the Maritimes, $65, 70 in Quebec, which still has a carbon tax. And as low as, as much as $1.20 or 22 in Calgary and Edmonton, and of course in the interior of BC, which can never be ignored, still $1.40 to $1.60. And a lot of that has to do with just differences between gas stations. They have what's called a retail margin that allows them to cover the cost of operating their gas station, paying for the electricity, to turn on the pumps, otherwise you won't get gasoline, and honoring your credit cards. You produce a credit card, you think it's the oil company that's paying for it. It's actually the retailer, the person behind the counter, his company is doing it. So there's a lot of moving parts in terms of gasoline. It has gone up and it's come down a little bit, but generally speaking, some people were very concerned that gas prices had gone down dramatically at the beginning of April and have now come right back up. Much of that to do with the fact that, the consumer carbon tax was removed by the Carney government, at least temporarily, to be replaced with something else, ostensibly when they get around to producing a budget. We'll talk a little bit more about that. And of course, we now, of course, saw the beginnings of OPEC saying that they're going to, pour more oil into the market, and that brought oil down about $10 a barrel, good enough for about another 10-cent decrease. So all in all, net 30 at the beginning of April, but on April 15th, we switched back from winter to summer gasoline. That's the thing. They changed the formulation of gasoline in the summer because you want to make it less volatile when it comes to higher temperatures. It tends to evaporate and go in the environment. In the winter, well, you don't have to worry so much about it. You just want to make sure the darn stuff really works and it starts your vehicle. So they put butane in there. Butane is a very cheap product compared to what they have to use in the summer. So we saw prices move up about 8 cents a liter because of that. Since then, we've also seen oil pick up about $5 a barrel, so another 5 cents a liter. So that 30-cent that we saw at the beginning of April, that made everybody very happy, and it proved what I've been saying for some time. The high cost, extravagant cost of the carbon tax was not worth the effort. It certainly didn't change the weather as far as I could see the rest of April and May, which is pretty cold. But I digress. What we've seen is prices have come back up. And of course, they do have, a significant amount still buried in it, not just provincial taxes and federal taxes, which go to government programs and to pay down what governments need. There's also small components of the old leftover carbon tax. The second carbon tax, the clean fuel standard, that's already 4 or 5 cents a liter. And so gasoline, for some people, is not a big deal. Hey, I can drive an electric vehicle, or I live downtown in any given city, so I don't really use a car. But transportation gets your food to your grocery store downtown, and the economy of the world would come to a crashing halt if that were not the case. For those who think it's no big deal, and that tends to be a lot, including our national media, they don't really think of it as an important issue. It's really at the core of our cost of living, not just in terms of, that it drives the cost of everything else. And we've seen that when there was a drop in carbon taxes, we saw year-over-year inflation rate drop almost a full point to go and to demonstrate the idea that carbon taxes have had an impact on driving up the cost of everything. Now, beyond that, gas prices, they're up, they're down, and they can be predicted any day on my website here at affordableenergy.ca. I also do it on Gas Price Wizard or gaswizard.ca. So for anybody who needs to know what gas is tomorrow, and by the way, across the country, it's Tuesday, Mondays and Tuesdays, except for gas bars pushing up and down gas prices, compressing that retail margin, there is no change at the wholesale level.
Great. Thank you, Dan. Thank you very much. And we'll be posting Dan's website, of course, on this podcast. Now, Dan, so there's a change in the consumer carbon tax, as you mentioned. And you mentioned off camera that there's a big change with that. But let me put this in terms that my little mind can understand. I was upset the other day, actually, because I was in a grocery store, a local grocery store, and I overheard a lady, and she was angry. She was upset. And she said, today, I can't even afford the hamburger, which usually is the low-cost meat. Here's a question. Can you draw the line between the carbon tax, the industrial carbon tax, and the fact that some people can't even afford to buy food anymore? How does it relate to the price of food? I know you mentioned it, but let's go deeper.
Well, Neil, that was a huge factor in terms of the price of food. And despite federally paid economists and scientists who try to say no, the Bank of Canada confirmed that, in fact, carbon taxes occupied a pretty big portion of that. And we're still seeing the echo. The input costs of agriculture are still very much alive, even though this ended on April 1st. Many of the products that we're seeing that are processed, the production, the transportation, everything needed to get it from farm gate to grocery checkout still has a bit of an impact. But I should point out a couple of things. One, affordableenergy.ca funded a project that was done by Professor Sylvain Charlebois of Dalhousie University, the food professor. And then he provided 2 peer-reviewed studies which pushed back on the federal government's net zero climate agenda that said there was no impact of carbon taxes on inflation. I mean, you don't have to be a rocket scientist or an economist to know that was the case. But most of these smart people walked around trying to convince individuals that wasn't the case. So we provided 2 peer-reviewed studies which showed that the disruption of the supply chain was sufficient to cause food prices to go up, which is one of the reasons why it went up. But the current reason or the current reasoning behind increased prices, not just the elevated cost of doing business in Canada is much higher. It's that, well, no one wants to talk about it. The Carney government put tariffs on US products, and they did not remove them. So when you buy your avocado from Mexico through transiting through the United States, or you talk about any product that's made in California or south of the border into the hothouses, their growing season is a little bit more obvious than ours. Everything that has come in from the United States has a tariff on it, and it didn't get removed. So that's one of the reasons why, if you're angry at the price of food, look, don't take it from me. You should be damn livid at the Liberals. And if you voted for them, well, you voted for them. It's on you.
Hmm. Well, I'm going to say this. Mr. Carney came across, and he is supposed to be the great, and I say this very respectfully, great economist, former Bank of England. But I'm looking at our own economy, and while it's cooling a little bit, I guess, or the prices are cooling minorly because of the removal temporarily of the tax, I don't see his work. In fact, let's be straightforward. I don't see a budget. Our own parliamentarians voted for a budget in spring. They don't actually have to do it, but I'm shocked that they're not doing it. It's because they can't figure out a way to break the news of what's happened in the last 10 years.
It has a lot to do with the fact that they are hoping that they can govern by executive authority and bypass Parliament when and if they can. Perhaps they don't even need Jagmeet Singh anymore, when in fact they just don't have to visit Parliament to disclose or to provide any type of opportunity to get back on track after a full year. I mean, this Parliament will not come back. This House of Commons will only sit for another week, and then it won't come back until the end of September. That's one full year from the time in which a decision was made by the Speaker of the House then, Greg Ferguson, someone I knew who used to work for Jean Chrétien when he was an assistant before he became a member, and ultimately did not succeed in becoming a speaker again. I guess he was replaced. But he made a decision last September saying, you know, the federal government must produce documents. There's been a request to provide documents on the so-called Green Slush Fund, the STDC scandal, in which as much as $800 million was misappropriated. And until the government could declare and provide that, the speaker ruled that there be no more business of government. So we had that in September. That went through until January, at which point Justin Trudeau realized he was cooked. Prorogued Parliament, and the Parliament has only sat for about a week and a half, and it's going to rise in a week and a half, which means we're not getting anything done. There's a lot of talk. There's a lot of the old expression. There's a lot of bones and meat, but I think everyone's asking now, where's the beef? As the old expression from the 1980s goes, there is nothing out there, and I am like you and many others. Even more concerned now that what Mark Carney is actually hiding by not having a budget is a devastating, review of the country's finances, which accord with what I think most people feel. It's no longer elbows up, and you can no longer simply blame the United States and the tariffs. We were in a pickle long before, the Orange Man bad south of the border took over. So Canadians now have to really reconcile why and how they are going to manage to, what excuses they're going to find to, as it were, absolve the government of what has been very bad behavior and what looks like a major cover-up with Mark Carney, again, pushing his creds, saying he's the guy he's the man with the stuff, that the royal jelly. I don't see this happening. And sooner or later, he's going to have to fish or cut bait.
Well, I have to say, I wonder if I'm not sure if Canadians are even taking the time to understand the importance of the budget. So I'm going to ask you a really simple question that everybody should understand. So what's the diff with having a budget now and having one in the spring? Does it really matter?
Oh, well, no, the reason is simply you have not had a budget in a year. You can't propose to spend money or to allocate money unless, of course, you have the approval of Parliament, which this government has not had. It did get 60 billion bucks a little while ago in order to keep the government running under, extraordinary circumstances, because it was during an election, or so that was the excuse, and it had been prorogued. But those excuses are running very thin. People want to know how bad the situation is out there. They just want to know what's going on, because as Yogi Berra once said very famously, if you don't know where you're going, chances are you're going to wind up somewhere else. And that's where I think the country's gone. We don't know what the hell is going on. I think for a lot of Canadians, whether they realize it or not, it's a little bit like saying, I got all these obligations. I got my mortgage coming up. I got my utilities coming up. I got food on the table. I haven't checked my bank account. Doesn't matter. I'll just keep hoping winging it and hoping this will happen. Or maybe, tell everybody how eloquent you are. That's great. But the rubber is going to start to meet the road very quickly. The fact that it didn't happen now, we're waiting another 4 months before a budget, I think is very serious. 1 year, 1.5 years from a budget is far too long. And most parliamentary responsible governments would never go that long. And certainly not, the public would never tolerate that kind of thing in the past.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Just a multi-trillion-dollar entity that has no idea where it's going right now, won't till maybe the fall. It's amazing to me, but they are planning. They are planning, in fairness, a tax cut to the middle class, and they're somehow working that through. But I wonder just how much it will actually affect the middle class positively or negatively, Dan. Do we even know yet?
Well, I hear a lot of expenditure coming from Mark Carney, 225 billion, and some of those are just nice things to have. 2% commitment to NATO to ensure that your GDP spending. So if you're taking in $2 trillion, that you're going to up and ensure that at the end of the day, at least you have set aside on an annual basis at least 400 million for the Canadian Armed Forces, but it's going to have to be a cumulative to get to that level. It's going to take several billion. A tax cut will take money away from revenue. Is a tax cut what's needed at a time in which you have a food crisis, you have a housing crisis, you have a jobless crisis? I'm not sure what kind of a tax cut will pay for people who are seeing social services dropping. What kind of tax cut will pay to get them better access to our healthcare system? As a Liberal of many, many years, these were issues that we raised in the 1990s when we saw the country's finances were going off a cliff and turned things around. And there was a number of reasons that happened. It wasn't just because how we did. It's that we were very fortunate. The United States was starting to take off economically. We were very fortunate that the provinces were on side, willing to take those cuts and share the burden. And we had Canadians on side at the time. Today, I'm not so sure Canadians are on side. Because I think unless Canadians get something, and I don't mean to be disrespectful, but unless they get something out of it, they're not willing to go along with it. How are they going to handle the possibility that we have a $70 billion deficit? That's massive when you contrast both sides of your economy. Think of $70 billion compared to a total economy, which is about $2 trillion. And then think of your debt already at 1.3, $1.4 trillion. So that's only the federal. The provincial has the same amount. Ontario's debt's through the roof. Quebec, British Columbia. When you put all these debts, these sovereign and sub-sovereign debts together, Canada has a debt situation in which 150% of its GDP. So what it produces in a year, everything produces in a year, the debt is still 50% greater than what that whole debt is. So that's a very serious thing. It's like saying, we're going to take on more debt while at the same time not being able to find our ability to pay it down. And so if you provide a little tax cut here and there, that might satisfy a certain group of people out there who, give me $50, give me I think Doug Ford did that. And look what's happened. His province, our province here in Ontario, is in massive debt. It's only a matter of time before the bond rating agencies declare our creditworthiness suspect. And that could cause interest rates to go even higher and, generally speaking, drive up the cost of living.
And it's interesting what you said, Dan, because ironically, we do need the revenue for this country to work. I mean, there's a discussion about NATO right now, but nobody in their right mind questions the need for our military, our brave military people to have the right equipment, the right numbers, the right training. I think we all agree with that. So again, it comes back to a budget. I mean, last year, our military people received sleeping bags and they couldn't be used in the winter. I mean, that's just such horrible planning. It is that quandary of where we go. And I understand what you said about the middle class tax. I agree with that. But again, it comes back to a budget. Let's just go back to that middle class tax cut for a minute, too. I'm starting to hear things. I'm starting to see things that suggest that there may be a sleight of hand going on where the Liberals are trying to pass some other things unrelated to the tax through this, and they're dangerous because some of them may have to do with, I'm not sure, free speech. It could be just about anything. So is this an omnibus bill,
Yeah.
or is there a game, or what is this, Dan?
Yeah, well, the idea is that if you put some really bad things in there and make the other things pretty palatable, then you vote against it, then the government will hold you out as being people who have voted against something that the public desperately wants or would like to desire. But it's a Trojan horse, and games and gimmicks can continue. But the fiscal reality of the country is that these we're in dire straits, and whether you like it or not, the economy is not performing. And save and except certain regions of the country where there is growth, there is no economic growth in Ontario. There's no economic growth to speak of in Quebec. We are badly indebted. We've made major commitments that we don't necessarily have to outcomes that we cannot possibly afford. We're still on the hook for a $34 billion pipeline that should have been built for zero with Kinder Morgan, and we now have find ourselves having to pay $34 billion. I ask Canadians who think that's cool and that the climate folks out there who block this, along with their friends in the Liberal, NDP, and Green parties and Bloc, who thought this was a great thing, how many hospitals could have used that $34 billion? And how many waiting
Exactly.
rooms do we have? How many people waiting in line are saying, we brought out a number of people in this country. We can't get access to decent health care or other programs, but we got $34 billion because we wanted to make good and allow climate alarmists to go around and really vandalize and stop something that was absolutely important to the country. Now I'm tilting on the energy side only because this would never have been tolerated in my time as a Liberal government. We would have told these people to pack up and leave, and we would have told so-called charitable organizations who fund these people, who are not charities at all, that it was time for them to cease and desist and go find another country to try to hogtie. Because at the end of the day, if Canada can't move its oil, its gas, its natural resources, we're dead in the water. There's no talk about worrying about the budget when you haven't got really a pot to do your business in and throw it, or pay for a window to throw it out of.
And it's fascinating because, of course, now the tension about moving energy, using our natural resources, that could remove so much of our debt and put people in such a great position, not worrying about buying Hamburger, to be specific. That
Exactly.
is, that was the difference between the parties in the last election. But now what I'm seeing, Canadians are aware, we are seeing a tension now over energy that has one province, my son's sitting in it right now, looking to maybe leave confederation. It used to be just Quebec when we were younger, but now the West is angry. I don't see the need for this anger. What I mean is, I don't see why Ottawa is trying to create this anger.
Yeah. Well, it's not 2015 anymore, and you've got to give up on your net zero nonsense, which Mark Carney is very well known for. He's the granddaddy of some of the stuff. So when you come out and say you're going to build a national corridor of energy, and you're going to be an energy superpower, and everyone's fine with that because they also know it means that oil and gas, we get to export more of it because we have a hell of a lot of it. And the rest of the world really wants it more from us than from other places. And then we turn around and say, oh, but there has to be a social license. There has to be, we know it to be a national interest, but we're going to give provinces the ability to have a veto. Well, that's crazy. That means a handful of miscreants can go around and say no, absolutely not, while at the same time saying, well, it's okay, we'll pay $34 billion. In the case of British Columbia, who used every tool in the toolbox to wreck the Trans Mountain pipeline expansion, which had been given and passed all the rigorous requirements to build a pipeline. We still tried to stop them and block them. We allowed fanatics and miscreants and globally paid climate nut jobs to come in and try to stop this thing. And we had a British Columbia government that come out and said, we will do everything in our power to stop it. It costs you and I $34 billion. There's 42 million people in this country. That means we're out $1,000 ahead. Now, when is British Columbia planning to pay that back? Or some of the climate grifters and some of their foundations, the Suzuki Foundation, I can go on. We think of the ones that have been used, that have been around for quite some time, that I've known over time. These are individuals and organizations that pay to create and disrupt, even when there is legal permission. So what it says, Mark Carney sitting down with the provinces, yeah, I'll give you your energy corridor, but I'm going to let NDP, I'm going to let the NDP in British Columbia, and I'm going to let the Bloc Québécois, the Parti Québécois, whoever in Quebec to say there's no social license. If that's the case, then of course Alberta's going to be upset. Alberta pays the fair share of equalization in this country through their taxes. They punch way above their weight. But if Quebec's going to use the 13 billion bucks because it can claim cheaper rates for energy as a means of gaming the equalization formula and take that money out of Alberta, while at the same time saying, no, Alberta, we're not going to allow a pipeline to cross our territory because there is no social license or because there's no consensus, or British Columbia that won't allow a northern gateway going to the northwest because it's crossing our territory. And Mark Carney says that's the conditions. Sounds like he's going to try to use the province to blame what he really wants, and that's to stop these pipelines. Now, it's good because we know Mark Carney and his company, Brookfield, has just bought the largest pipeline in the world, Colonial Pipeline. They've also bought pipelines in Brazil, bought pipelines in the United Arab Emirates, have coal plants, have coal operations. These folks are doing what no one else is able to do. Apparently, they probably got the carbon credit markets, in their own corner. But the issue here for Mark Carney is simple: keep, dangling those threats and those conditions and those escape conditions for provinces like British Columbia and Quebec to block pipelines, while at the same time trying to build an electricity grid, which we can't build. It's very expensive, in the trillions of dollars. Then I think you're going to find out that it's not separation or Alberta alienation that I'd be concerned about. It's that Alberta rightly feels it's getting a raw deal. It's being kicked in the teeth while it's willing to help the rest of the country. I'm not from Alberta. I don't know many people in Alberta, but I can tell you, if your neighbor did that to you, you wouldn't be very happy with them, and you'd probably want to keep your distance. And I think that's what Alberta is trying to do right now.
Well, I certainly hope that we get the whole energy chapter of our country in order, because it has so many strings that will affect pretty well everything else in our country. And it's going to decide, I believe, what direction this country is going to go in. And I look at my little grandchildren who are just little kids, and I'm thinking, you guys are still going to be paying for this. And it makes no sense to me. Let's go a little bit closer to home. Literally, let's talk about housing, because it still seems to be out of reach for many people, and we don't have enough houses. We have too many people. And the real question, I think, and this goes for any party again, is what do you think about housing? And I'm going to say something that nobody's saying. The bad old seniors that voted for Liberal, except for me and you. All the rest did. No, but let's be serious here. We want our children and grandchildren to be able to buy homes. There's no question about it. And if we change this country, in my opinion, based on what we've just been talking about, everybody should be able to afford a home, in my opinion, or most people. But the question that I have is, they're thinking now, we don't know if it's true, it's only a rumor. Please send comments, but don't yell at me. They may, at some point, start to try to tax the equity on people's homes after it's sold if the home is over $1 million. I don't understand why you would attack the home sellers, number one. But number two, Dan, wouldn't that just slow down the housing market again? Might it be smarter just to hang on to your house and will it away? I don't know what to think.
Well, my dad built a few homes. I built a subdivision many, many years ago along with him, and knew a little bit about this industry. And a couple things come to mind about that being at the end. The government is going to be looking to try to find a way to bring back something called tax mortgage deductibility. I'm old enough to remember my second campaign, in which Joe Clark had proposed that as an idea. In the 79 campaign, of course, his bigger idea was to tax gasoline by 19 cents a gallon, 4 cents a liter, and he was defeated on that. Nevertheless, I think in terms of, we have to look at where housing prices have gone. The cost of building from 2020 to 2025 rose 58%. Actual cost. And I know because I was building a house at the time, and it turns out that I got caught in that same thing too. So whether it was COVID or the cost of building, or just, people going absolutely crazy, they wanted to build homes that they couldn't afford, we created a speculative boom, which was then followed by a real crunch when we realized just how many people wanted to get in the markets and couldn't. There's a number of factors that go into this. When I built the subdivision, I can tell you the biggest hurdle was always getting the approvals, getting sewer dedication, park dedication fee, and all sorts of other impost fees. That's extraordinarily expensive. Those can be waived and would bring down the cost of servicing land. The second one is the objection to servicing land. Everyone's still NIMBY. not in my backyard. No, we don't want to have another subdivision, even though they live in the subdivision that we once had the privilege of not having
Subdivided
people
what?
stop them from living there. The other one is one that's probably not well known, but it's very cogent to what I've been talking about on net zero. Government green regulations are driving up the cost of building. Like it or not, the federal regulations from air to appliances to the standards that are now required and have to be met just adds to the cost. So there's no way of getting affordability when you have municipalities saying no to sewer allocation, no to quick timing on turning around the infrastructure needed to build the homes, and quick turnaround on the timing in order to build homes. Then we have a whole coterie of people say, intensify, intensify, intensify. Go to downtown Toronto. As younger people, we would see that. You could see the lake from pretty much stood up two, three
I
floors at
remember.
Young and Bloor. Now you can't see it more than a couple feet ahead of you. We have created a real disaster. I mean, some people think it's beautiful to build these dog crates everywhere, but at the end of the day, this is a country that has a lot of land. I've often and would often tell my friends, listen, I'll pay the $150, jump out of WestJet, fly out Western Canada, but make damn sure you got a window seat and keep your head plugged. And for 4 hours, look how much arable land we have. I'm not saying that that's a go out there and everybody should build, but I think we've got it really backwards. And the demands and the requirements on housing is incongruent with the obvious need we have today. We've got to build them faster, and we have to build them with less government intervention and fewer bureaucrats, what I used to call the people with patches on their arms, smoking pipes back in the 1970s, sitting back and finding all sorts of clever ways to drive up the cost of land acquisition and its higher and best use, while at the same time looking at individuals and finding better ways in order to get our products to market and to build those things to make materials that much cheaper. That can all be done, but you got to get the federal government to finally admit it has a huge role in pulling back on its net zero nonsense that's driving up the cost, not just of food, not just of energy, not just the cost of living, but actually the cost of housing. One leads to another, and this is the same Liberal government that brought in far too many people who are now in need of housing, and we can't meet that demand.
Yeah. And I also just wanted to touch quickly as we wind this down, Dan, and thanks so much because this could go on for hours. But there's great concern about public safety and crime. It's just growing. And, it appears that that's what set off Mr. Trump, or at least that was part of the excuse that he used with fentanyl and the problems with that, even though it appears that we are not a big source of fentanyl into the US. But talk a bit about public safety and crime because people are not feeling safe. That's because they're not necessarily safe. Isn't it the job of a federal government to do their part to protect Canadians?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's part of the social contract, the way which we give away our part of our rights in order to be protected by the state. The state's going to turn around and say to people, you're going to slap on the wrist, you'll be out in the street the next day, no matter how serious the crime. I think it is cause for pause. And there are a number of factors there. I mean, you mentioned fentanyl. We know it's not so much the fentanyl factors, it's that the precursors are coming into Canada as a soft target. They're coming from Mexico. 47 organized criminal international gangs, everything from China to Russia to Iran, have all got, as it were, their finger in the pot, producing in this country something that didn't just happen overnight that Trump noticed. Biden's administration, we now find, and through good work done by Sam Cooper of the Bureau, he's started his own thing, demonstrates that this has been an ongoing and growing problem that Canada basically took a laissez-faire approach to it. You'd hate to think that it has something to do with the fact that in 2015 it was all about kids smoking marijuana and they shouldn't be criminalized, to the point where the government showed absolute indifference to this growing concern. We all have loved ones, friends, family who've lost individuals to fentanyl, and it's one of the main reasons why taking this as an issue and being serious about it, as much as we might loathe Donald Trump for it, I give him full credit for underscoring it, saying, yeah, we have a problem in this country and we're going to damn well deal with it. And they are. But we're not going to let countries like Canada that take a sort of a laissez-faire approach, let's be liberal and charter of rights nonsense, which at the end of the day has led to more people killed in Canada to fentanyl than the number of servicemen who gave their lives for this country in the Second World War.
Absolutely shocking. I I have so many topics to discuss with you, but we also talked about them about a month ago and with our first visit with you. And folks, again, we're going to post that because there's some terrific discussion on things like the online harms bill. But this one's close to my heart because a lot of people have actually come to me to ask me about it. There is, of course, a sort of a laissez-faire approach, in my opinion, those are my words, to crime. We just touched on that a minute ago and how criminals are treated in this country, and we need a lot of work in that area. But there is growing anti-Semitism, there's growing racism in this country. And again, it appears that there's no interest, or I shouldn't say that, very little interest coming from the federal government. Again, today, the great Holocaust Memorial in Ottawa was
I
defaced.
know, I saw that.
But there are other people of every culture and every religion. And aren't all Canadians being governed by the government and protected by the government where they're supposed to? Or are they allowed to just chop it up and decide that some just aren't worth their time? And yeah, that sounds harsh on purpose.
Well, I'm always worried about the outcome. If we could have people who so casually disregard what happened October 7th and legitimize it by attacking the Jewish people, sovereign people, completely getting rid of that idea, and then pushing up their Palestinian flags and the one finger, that's jihadism. That's not public expression. And if public safety is not paramount and we're not prepared to enforce our laws, to put some of these people on notice, especially if they're not from this country, that it's time for them to pack up and get the hell out. If we're not prepared to do that, then what's the point of having celebrated what my parents, my grandparents did, and what my relatives did? And that's to fight to put an end to this kind of stuff in the Second World War. If we are so bereft of what's going on around us and willing to tolerate this stuff, what is it that we are going to actually promote? And if this is why our laws are not being enforced, or our judiciary is taking a very passive look at all this, I wouldn't be worried about Alberta separation. I'd be worried about social disintegration and chaos, which of course these kind of actions are inviting. And like it or not, if people are not willing to understand our values or traditions, the ethic that has brought this country together, the Judeo-Christian ethic, like it or not, you don't hear politicians talk about that anymore, but it's true. If you don't like those things, by all means, don't hold us back from letting you take the next boat the hell out of here.
Yeah, and of course, the immigrants who come here to form a new life, to be a part of it, and that you don't have to be Judeo-Christian. If you want to live under the laws and customs of this great country, and so many have, and so many are doing so well. It's just a question of a government that actually gives us the rules to live by and then enforces them. That's what I'm very, very concerned about myself with this stand. We have a great country. We elect governments. Some we like, some we don't like. Luckily, we can still elect. The people in this country put the Liberals back in power as a minority government. We have quite the changes in this country. But I say to everybody, and I'm glad we did this tonight, Dan, thank you. This was a report card for just what's happened up till now, but it's a report card that still reflects, in my opinion, the last 10 years is not showing change. And that's a problem because we need a budget to start with and not in 4 or 5 months from now. And our country, and I'll finish with this, is worth fighting for. Canada's a great country. We have it all. Everybody should be happy living together. And in fact, that's not just a utopian statement. I actually believe in our great country. We have everything that it takes to have that.
Look, it's a country well worth fighting for, Neil, but it's something that we can't take for granted. And so, for those reasons, you set it out very, very well. This is a country that must also recognize the errors of its ways, and it must be on a course for correction. If it can't do that, then it is going to continue to fritter away. And I hope that is not the case. But I don't think it's undeniable that what we've seen in the past years is significant, as we've seen a degradation in our attitudes towards our country, the belief in our country. And it shouldn't take Donald Trump for us to suddenly put back our Canadian flags and be proud in our country when 2 years ago we were ripping down statues and taking a knee everywhere. Those are different issues, but it's important that Canadians really understand the value of this country and what makes this country tick. And that's the ethic that brought it here, the institutions which preserve it, and the prosperity which will continue to serve as its vanguard for the next generations to come if we do this right and don't allow local narratives, recent narratives, interlopers with the latest trend, vicious as they may be, from taking a country over.
Agreed, agreed. My great-grandparents came here a long, long time ago, and they didn't come here because of what we're seeing today. They came here because they were escaping what they see here today. McTeague, it's always a pleasure. We thank you. And everybody, we'll be back soon with another Your Great Matters podcast. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for watching. If you found it interesting and you liked it, give us a thumbs up. If you're ready to subscribe, click right here. And if you'd like to see another episode, click right here. Tell a friend. Send us comments. Thanks a lot.